So last night I watched 28 Years Later, and this was one of my most anticipated films of the year. I was so excited for this film, especially with how well the trailers marketed the film. I think I must have been 6 or 7 years old when I watched the first two films, but those stuck with me and they were quite scary because, I'd never seen a zombie film. I know they're infected. It's not technically, it's a rage virus, it's not technically zombies, but we'll call them zombies. But yeah, I'd never seen one set in the UK. So it just felt so relatable seeing it set in Britain, and I think that aspect made it more scary for me. And after watching these films, I just really wanted a third film, especially with how the second one ended with, the infected going to Paris. But then, like, it was just silent for years. They were saying they weren't going to make it. And then finally, a few years ago, they announced it was in production and that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland were returning, which got me really excited. Then all the trailers came out. They they were amazing, and then the film finally came out, and I watched it, and unfortunately, I was disappointed by it. That's not to say I hate the film, because I actually thought the film was really good. I was really enjoying the film, and I was like, oh yeah, this is like a solid 8 out of 10 film. And then the ending happens, and it brings the film down so much. Like I'd say it drops to either a 7 or a 6.5, just because of how bad the ending is. So I will probably have this as a spoiler review because I can't talk about why this film frustrated me so much without speaking about the ending. First of all, I'll speak about what I liked in the film because there was actually so much to love in this film, and I did. But it's like I said, the ending just brings it down. But anyway, the film starts off during the initial outbreak of the virus in 2002, and it's the scene you see at the start of the trailer where all the kids are sitting in the living room watching Teletubbies. And I will say, this scene made me so nostalgic because the set design of the living room was just so accurate to a household in the early 2000s. With the fat boxed television and the CD, DVD rack, it just felt so nostalgic. But yeah, the infected break in. I think it's like the kids' families. They break into the living room, start killing the kids. One of them manages to escape from the living room, but then he sees the rest of his family getting turned into infected. But then at one point, he's cornered by like two of them, and the next scene just cuts and he's somehow escaped. And it just kind of felt like a cop out. That part was a bit annoying, I can't lie. It would have been nice to see how the kid escaped from that situation because it just kind of felt jarring, like a cut. It felt like a scene was cut. But then he runs to a church. He sees his father, the priest, and then the priest gives him a necklace which is like has a cross on it. Tells him to always wear it, and he'll be with him. And then the kid hides, and the father says how it's Judgment Day, and he just lets all the infected come and turn him. And then the kid escapes the church, and it cuts to 28 years later, which is where the film actually begins. I thought I would mention the opening just because it does link back to the ending, which is the part I hated. I did think it was a good opening. Like, it definitely throws you straight into the film, and it's quite a tense situation seeing the kid running away from these infected. But it also did kind of feel like a lesser version of the opening from the second film. But that opening was just so great, and I don't think they can top that. But yeah, the opening was still good, and it throws you straight into the film and gets you hooked on it. But then you get like a title card saying how it's 28 years later. The infected did reach the rest of the EU, but they got pushed back, and now the whole of Britain has been quarantined again, and Britain has been pretty much abandoned by the rest of the world and just left there to fend for itself. The main story takes place on the small little island community you see within the trailers, with Aaron Taylor Johnson and his son Spike, played by Alfie Williams. And this community is made up of people who, lived through the initial outbreak, they knew of the world before, and there's young children, such as the protagonist Spike, who only know of this world because that's what they were born into. So Spike and his father go off to the mainland as a sort of rite of passage for Spike to get his first infected kill. And this first 30 minutes of the film, like the first act, is by far the best moments of the film. It's definitely where the cinematography is at its best. I mean, throughout the whole film, the cinematography is great, and there are some actually really stunning shots. But I do feel like a lot more care was put in during these first 30 minutes. It's great that the cinematographer from the first film returned to do this one, because I think it really helps link this and the first film together, and it gives it such a great, gritty style, and I was just all for it. These first 30 minutes are like a tense survival horror film between a father and son, and it is where the film peaks because there's no more moments in the film that feel as tense as the moment you get at the start, which is kind of annoying. We get to see like a new alpha variant of the infected, and these guys are smarter and faster than the usual infected, and they also just walk around with their dicks just flopping about like absolutely huge penises. Especially the alpha that's like seen later on in the film. His is just absolutely massive and it's just constantly flopping around. I don't know. There's a lot of dick in this film. It's really weird. But these alpha variants are pretty cool. They just like grab heads and just rip them out with their spines, and it's so cool to see. But yeah, they get chased by these alpha variants and they have to try to run back to the community, and it's just such a cool sequence. But the film just never gets as exciting as that again. Once Spike and his father do return to the community, this is where the film takes a shift and kind of changes into a completely other film because the father kind of gets pushed to the side and you don't actually see him again until the end. And instead, it becomes about Spike trying to take his mom who's ill and she's dying, but he doesn't know why she's ill. And he tries to take her to see a doctor who's living on the mainland that he's recently heard of. And that becomes the plot of the rest of the film. But this doesn't actually bring the film down, and I was still very interested in this part of the story. And this actually takes up most of the story, this plot does. But the film does take a much slower pace from now on. It's not as intense as the first act was, but it is still enjoyable. I'm just going to skip over most of the story because it is just them getting to the doctor. And if you've seen the film, you'll understand what I am talking about. But so yeah, Spike eventually gets to the doctor with his mom, and the doctor tells him that his mom is dying of cancer, so there is no way to treat her. And obviously, Spike doesn't know what cancer is because he's been born into this savage and brutal world where pretty much all the doctors, any medical supplies are all gone. So the doctor does give her like an easy and peaceful death, which it does make for quite an emotional scene actually in this film, and I thought it was handled pretty well. These films, especially 28 Days Later, have always been more about exploring humanity rather than being a straight up action horror survival film. They've always had these human elements that they explore more. It's more about the drama, and 28 Years Later is no different. It's more of a family drama and coming of age story, which those aspects are handled really well, and I was invested in these parts of the story. But it's after this where the film just goes down. So after his mom has passed away, Spike is told to return home, and instead he decides not to return home, and he leaves a letter for his father explaining he will return when he feels ready. So he's going to live on the mainland and explore it on his own for a bit. And he does leave a baby for them. I'll explain the baby later, as I just kind of want to talk about the ending. So yeah, Spike's on his own. You see him cooking a fish, and then he's getting chased by some infected, and he starts killing some of them, and he's running, but then he runs into a dead end. There's a bunch of rocks covering his way out, and he's blocked off. The infected are chasing him, and then out of nowhere, the kid from the start of the film is now grown up, and he appears, and he's got long blonde hair. He's wearing a tracksuit. I can't remember what color it was. And suddenly, other people with long blonde hair appear, wearing matching tracksuits just in different colors. They honestly look like the British version of the Power Rangers, and it's just kind of ridiculous, but also a bit funny. But then they all jump off the rocks, and when I say jump, I mean they're like flipping in the air, like doing front flips and back flips really high in the air. They land on the ground, they start killing all the infected while still doing their flips, and whilst this is happening, a death metal version of the Teletubbies theme song is playing, and it's just such a tonal shift compared to the rest of the film. The rest of the film is so gritty, dramatic, and then it just kind of turns into a wild action comedy in the last 5 minutes out of nowhere. And everyone in the cinema just suddenly burst out laughing at how ridiculous this moment was. But yeah, once they kill all the infected, the main guy, who's the kid from the start, he turns to Spike and says his name is Jimmy, and the film then ends. But suddenly, The long blonde hair, the tracksuit, and then the name Jimmy, it all clicks. And this actually has been confirmed. So brace yourselves. These people are a cult of Jimmy Savile worshippers. Yeah, you heard that right. Jimmy Savile worshippers. Now, for any American viewers who don't know who Jimmy Savile is, I shall unfortunately tell you about this monster. He was a popular personality in Britain during the 70s and 90s, with his fame fizzling out after then. But he had different TV shows such as Jim Will Fix It, and he also used to raise a lot of money for charity. So, why is he a monster? Well, after his death, hundreds of sexual abuse allegations came out against him, and these were towards minors, very young children. There were allegations made against him whilst he was alive, but a lot of these were dismissed and covered by the BBC. And it's not like the fact that Jimmy Savile hid the fact that he was this monster. There are so many interviews where he pretty much straight up admits to what he's done, and it got passed off as jokes, and he got away with it for so many years. I mean, just look at a picture of the guy. You already know what this guy's up to. He's just a disgusting person. So seeing a cult of people worshipping him in this film, it just kind of felt distasteful, especially since they are saving a kid. Of course, in this universe, the outbreak happened in 2002, so they actually have no knowledge of what Jimmy Savile did, as that wasn't revealed until 2011 or 12 after his death. But as an audience, we know what he did. So it just felt really strange to see this scene played out in a comedic way within the film. It just felt kind of distasteful. I mean, maybe I am just being a bit soft as I'm a youth worker, but I don't know, it felt in poor taste. I do get what they are going for. This cult mainly consists of kids who would have idolized him and they grew up within the outbreak, so they probably still have that childish mind. And obviously, they don't have the real world knowledge. But I just think it's a bit weird. This cult is confirmed to be the villains of the next two films, so it will be explored. But it just felt like a rushed and tacked on ending just to set up another two films, where I would have preferred a more conclusive ending for this film. I feel like 28 years later could have been a standalone film. I don't think it needs two other films. I think this film could have easily been 2 hours 10 or 2 hours 20, because this film is actually just under 2 hours. But if it just had that little bit of an extra runtime, it could have had a more conclusive ending for this film, and it could have been a standalone instead of setting up two other films. I just don't think it was a necessary addition when the film already throws in so many different things that aren't fully explored. I don't think we need another thing because, we have the main community, which could have been explored a bit more. We have this idea and theme of isolation and the rest of the world abandoning Britain whilst the world carries on. There's also like the involved infected and the fact they can reproduce. Yeah, we see an infected give birth, which was weirdly a nice scene as you see some humanity in the infected as she holds hands with Spike's mom to give birth. So there's nice themes of motherhood there, but then the baby is not infected, but that's not explored any further. And I guess that's just another thing that they will explore in the next two films. But it's just kind of annoying. I wanted it to be a conclusive film. It just felt like Danny Boyle and Alex Garland had thought of so many ideas in between the years of this and the first film, and they just threw them all into a stew and didn't let it cook. A lot of the ideas are just half baked and are just setups for sequels, which is a really annoying trend in the film industry these days. The second film comes out in January next year, so we won't have to wait long to get answers. But I do believe the second film is directed by Nia DaCosta, and if you don't know who she is the woman who directed The Marvels. So I don't have a lot of faith in the second film. I mean, maybe she will prove that she is a good director and show that it was Marvel fucking her over, but who knows at this point. It's also weird because Danny Boyle has confirmed that he will direct the third film, so I'm a bit confused why he didn't direct the whole trilogy. At least Alex Garland is writing all three, but he better give them good endings as I'm losing faith in his Elden Ring film adaptation at this point. Also, Cillian Murphy is returning in the sequels, so we have that to look forward to. But what's not good is his character was called Jim, so I hope they do not put him in this weird Jimmy Savile cult. But yeah, this film just frustrated me so much. I was so hyped and there were so many things I liked, but it just felt like the film shat its pants at the finish line and it's not going to bother wiping its ass until the next race. I'm not really sure what that metaphor was all about. But if you've seen the film, let me know what you thought about it in the comments and I'll get back to you.